Hello, everyone. My name is Tanzile, Digital Health Strategy Associate at Bayer G4A. On behalf of the team, I would like to welcome you to our Pitch Club event today. We have created this event to give 4 digital health startups an opportunity to pitch their solution to relevant industry professionals, gain valuable insights from our jury members, and get the exposure they need to raise their company's profile. We have an audience Q&A at the end, so please feel free to type in your questions while the startups are pitching, and we will get to those on a first-come, first-served basis. Please remember to include the company name so that we can direct the question to the right startups. Now I would like to introduce our jury panel. This year, we have Matthew Holt, the founder and author of the Healthcare blog, co-chairman of Catalyst Health 2.0, and president of Smack Health. Thank you for joining us, Matthew. We also have Dr. Sven Jungmann, who is the CEO and founder of Halitus and co-founder of Luyu. Thank you for taking your time, Sven.
Hi, everyone.
Lastly, we have Alan Maxey, who is the US commercial lead of integrated care and innovation of Bayer. Thank you for joining us and being with us here today, Alan. With that said, let's kick off the Pitch Club event. 4 startups will be pitching today, and I would like to welcome our first startup, Virtually.
Hi, everyone.
Amir, please share your screen and introduce your company. You have 3 minutes to pitch. I hand over the stage to you.
Can you see my screen okay, Tanzil?
Yes.
Great. Hi, everyone. My name is Amir Bozorgzadeh. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Virtually, the company that is combining the neurosciences with virtual reality in order to address the huge impact that cognitive disorders are having on society, most especially Alzheimer's disease, in which the call to action among startups that are leveraging emerging technologies like virtual reality is, can we better profile the cognitive health of individuals than any incumbent platforms and technologies? Can we, more importantly, introduce new methodologies that could potentially detect the early onset of a cognitive illness, not just years, but maybe even decades before their early onset? Screen-based devices are great because they're accessible, but they also exclude the body. Virtual reality is literally the first embodied digital format that, as humans, we're not designed to live in 2 visual realities. When we are shown and introduced to an ecologically valid and multisensory experience, which is VR, then we are hijacked, literally. Our autonomic nervous system, our vestibular balance system, our proprioception believes the experience which is real, which also translates into higher, better levels of engagement, which translates into higher levels of adherence, higher level of quality of data. It also means volumetric data sets are being captured. Not only are we capturing the psychometric data from the content, but also the physical and gesticulation data. On top of that, we're I think the only company in the VR sector at the moment that is actively collecting and capturing pupil dilation tracking and heart rate variability, biosensors. And in fact, we have an AI learning algorithm that right now is able to take these biosensors and calculate your cognitive load in real time. And so we've created a library of VR cognitive games designed to test and train a range of cognitive abilities, not just like memory and problem solving, but also motor control skills and spatial orientation. We've created 15 of these titles to date with 54,000 early registered users, and a new product, which is an MCI screening tool that is about to release in the next couple months. We stand out from the pen and paper neuropsychological assessment tools and the brain training apps because VR goes above and beyond just typing and tapping on a screen with your fingers and thumbs, engaging the full body and capturing full body data. We have a number of clinical studies underway with partners like MIT for therapeutic areas like ADHD, with Roche in Portugal here. We are doing tests along the lines of therapeutic areas like Alzheimer's disease. We have won 12 industry awards in the past 2 years. We have 2 published papers, and we're actively looking for new partners, particularly on the pharmaceutical end, to continue to move forward. With a team that's a mix of scientists and game developers that are adamant in showing that the critical application of virtual realities in most above all in addressing cognitive disorders. Thank you.
Thank you, Amir, for your pitch. We now have 10 minutes for questions and feedback from the jury. And for the audience, you can type your questions in the comment section and we'll get to them at the end. Over to you, jury members.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say one of my questions, Amir, would be, as you look at the commercial landscape, what is your go-to-market strategy around entering the market? Are you looking at the provider space, direct to consumer? Are you looking at the payer employer space? What's your thought there?
We're looking to partner with our beachhead market is to partner with pharma companies. We believe that we can be a value add in a few different ways, but first and foremost is in pairing with phase 2 clinical studies as a companion diagnostic that can help get neuroscience drugs out into the market more readily. But we do have other areas that we're probing and looking into. The Roche partnership pilot specific to Alzheimer's disease, a remote cognitive monitoring tool for that area is our first partnership with pharma.
Great, thank you.
Amir, thanks. Pushing that a little bit further, is this just a diagnostic tool, or do you think do you think over time, and maybe in your trials, you prove some value from having this be used by people who are perhaps entering or have various early in the morning for me to say this and count on it, neurodegenerative decline. So, I mean, is it really just a more advanced diagnostic tool to have us pinpoint where a different drug should be used or something like that?
Well, in fact, the current product, Enhanced VR, is more of a monitoring and therapeutic tool to be used on a regular basis, daily, in fact, whereas the second product we're about to release is more of a diagnostic screening tool that could potentially be more sensitive than any tool in screening, not just MCI, but subjective cognitive decline. The current tool of Enhanced VR, we just published last month our first study in which we found increase in processing speed in those in university students with ADHD. So we do believe that in 3-4 years we can go on and right after companies like Achilles and be a digital therapeutic that's ultimately reimbursed for these types of cognitive disorders or learning challenges, like including long COVID and chemo brain and in these types of areas.
But but just to sort of continue that thought, as you commercialize, you think that this is going to be paid for by pharma as more as a companion diagnostic, and then more of a question mark over that sort of therapeutic benefit. If you look at the market of companies like Achilles and Pear, it's not great at the moment, but there's obviously a clinical promise, if not right now immediate market validation. So I understand that.
Right. Well, we know that market's going to open up probably in the next few years, and that's when we would actually be viable to be in that market. So in the meantime, we don't just see ourselves as a monitoring tool, therapeutic tool, or diagnostic tool. We're the next generation of data collecting about 250,000 data points every 3 minutes. So if you want to pair us as a next generation of data collection to help substantiate as a kind of a piggyback for getting drugs into the market, or helping with engagement, or helping with remote cognitive monitoring as a companion tool, I think we can really initially market and commercialize there.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Do you have any remaining questions? Any more from the jury member or feedback?
I was a bit curious. You mentioned these 2 studies, and you said you have evidence for the biomarkers. Could you expand a little bit on what the new evidence bases that you managed to generate so far in this young journey?
In fact, there's no biomarker studies. There's only internal work where, for example, we are able to detect within the 54,000 early registered users across 5 languages. They're all demographically profiled, and we are in fact collecting data points like sleep levels and mood levels. We can detect, for example, correlations between sleeping less than 6 hours and specific cognitive deficits that are detected. In terms of the study that was published, it was the ADHD one, which is a university student population of just 26 people and only a 1-month pilot. So it's very early days in that evidence, but I think it's promising. And if we look at all of the other types of screen-based solutions that are doing these types of things, we're the next generation, clearly. I don't understand any system that doesn't engage our whole body. I can't see that as being superior to virtual reality and ultimately augmented reality.
Can I have one more, or is it time up? Oh, sorry, Alan.
Yes, go ahead.
Wondering if you, in the future, you will be talking to the insurance companies or whatever. What do you believe, as of today, will be the biggest selling pitch? What data do you think you will show in terms of we reduced X by?
I think being able to detect cognitive deficits and deterioration at a very subtle level that is clearly right now not noticeable, and we do not have the tools to have that level of sensitivity. I think that's going to be the biggest selling point as a longevity sector, not just looking at people who are over 40, but really starting to look at longevity as something we need to start paying attention to, from adulthood onwards. Just like we do physical checkups, we need to start doing cognitive checkups. But the taboo and the lack of democratized access is holding things back. We need to make things more friendly. We need to make things more accessible and normalize it, destigmatize cognitive health.
So, Amir, if I could ask one last one, there's a great interest, obviously, in things like brain training games, Sudoku, people playing Wordle, whatever, to try to maintain cognitive health going forward. But obviously, those are low engagement, low cost things compared to VR. VR hasn't, as a whole, taken off the way some people thought it might do for sort of gaming. Obviously, gaming is huge, but VR is comparatively isn't that big. And despite the fact that we hear about the metaverse and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Are you assuming it'll get there, or do you think you're going to have to do something specific to encourage user engagement in your tools?
I mean, we do know,
but when it gets to the mass market, what do you think you're going to have to do to make people actually get engaged and use it regularly?
Yeah, I don't like personally the consumer market of VR. I'm not very popular in this scene because of that. I think it's only a good thing for surgical and use cases like in less than 20 minutes a pop. I think AR, once it's ready to go within the next 5 years, it'll be a great stepping stone for VR. Everything is done to go into there. But we're really focused on very specific use cases. We get about 150 people register every day with no marketing right now. So we're already seeing a mother reaching out because her son had a traumatic brain injury and she just wants something to help and motivate him in his recovery. We have someone who's 75 years old and is just trying to be ultimately proactive and having something that's about brain hygiene added to their daily, regime of going to the gym for their body. Now they're going to do something, a gym for the mind. There's a lot of interest in various areas, but I do think it's early days. Our focus is really specific to, I think, B2B, pharma, and ultimately a reimbursable solution for these types of cognitive deficits. And one last thing I want to say is there is, with TikTok and all these things, ADHD is no longer a problem just for those people who have a disposition towards it. We're all going to have some ADHD very soon if we don't already have it. They're destroying us. It's a cognitive crisis unfolding. Mark my words.
Thank you.
Interesting.
Thank you, Amir. And thank you to the jury members. I would now like to introduce the second startup, which is Promptly Health. Pedro, please share your screen and introduce your company. Again, you have 3 minutes to pitch.
Great, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. I'm Pedro, I'm the CEO of Promptly, and we are a real-world data company with this, I would say, bold vision of empowering every patient and every health organization on the planet with evidence on the outcomes of care. You may know that RWE, real-world evidence, is becoming more and more on the agenda, both of regulatory agencies. So both the FDA and NICE have recently released their RWE guidelines, new updated RWE guidelines, and the European Medicines Agency started a program called Darwin that is on generating real-world data on Europe, a program that we are part of, and pharma and medtech is relying more and more on RWE to accelerate, among other things, market entry. Obviously, the challenge is super big because of many things. Data location are hard to determine. Data is saved in different formats. data lives in different systems, and capturing prospective patient level data, patient even generated data is tremendously hard. So challenges coming from different places, and we are attempting to target those challenges in a very systematic and systemic way by creating solutions that target all this journey of generation of RWE from the collection and integration. So we have solutions that collect and integrate data directly from the EMRs, collect data directly from the patient, so patient-reported outcomes, patient-generated data from wearables. We are one of the companies that has been accredited by the European Commission to do harmonization according to the OMOP CDM model, so the OMOP clinical data model, and generating then this analysis and generation at scale after the data is harmonized. The business model is very much based on an evidence network. So we partner with data partners, with hospitals and evidence partners, and jointly generate this evidence and generate business based on this data in a federated way. So the data stays on the premises of the data custodian, and we aggregate and generate this analysis on the cloud, but always based on federated analysis. Some of our clients are basically in three main sectors, main verticals. So providers themselves that want also to use the solutions and generate evidence based on this data. Payers, basically insurance companies, some of the largest insurance companies in the countries where we are, and pharma and medtech. So Johnson & Johnson, Roche, Novartis, with some local agreements, with others global agreements, or EMEA agreements. Roche a global agreement, Alcon an EMEA agreement, Novartis Spain agreement, and Johnson & Johnson a Portuguese agreement. And with many of these companies, it's basically helping them generate evidence on a specific therapeutical area, specific product on their portfolio. So very much tailored things to their own business needs. The team that is behind this, we are people from healthcare, from companies that already did this for some of these clients, but doing this in a more federated way and doing this with new technologies to help scale this type of evidence. And yeah, this was it, and happy to take questions now.
Thank you for your presentation, Pedro. Now let's turn to the jury for questions and feedback.
Yeah, Pedro, I'd say, are you looking more from a patient outcomes improvement, or are you looking at financial ROI? It wasn't real clear to me what the end game was.
The end game is the generation of evidence on the outcomes improvement, yes, from the outcome side, but obviously also taking the financial side, also taking the costs into the many of these analyses.
Gotcha. Is there a certain therapeutic area that you focused on so far, or is it more broad-based across multiple therapeutic areas?
It's across multiple. So, but the examples are, for instance, with Johnson & Johnson is atrial fibrillation, with Novartis is on rheumatology, with Roche on neuromuscular disorders. So it's focused. With Alcon is on cataract surgery. So it's broad, but it's in several different areas, but focused on the business needs of these clients.
Great, thank you.
Pedro, two things. One is, could you say, there wasn't as much in the pitch as I liked about your sort of development as a company. You've done quite a bit. You have several pharma contracts. You have a decent number of people. You didn't say how much money you raised or where you are in revenue at the moment, sort of on the business side. So perhaps say a little bit about that. That's question one. So
yeah. So we raised 3 million. So we are from seed to Series A, basically. And
give me a sense of where you are revenue wise. I mean, how much is a contract? Is contract $100,000, several million? Just give me a sense about where. How many of these contracts do you need to become
north of 1 million? North of 1 million. So we're basically on 1 million ARR.
total or per contract? Give me a sense.
No. 1 million ARR.
For you.
Contracts are usually around 100, 150K.
And is the way to grow the business to get lots of more of the same contracts, or is it potential? Are these early stage pilots, and you expect contracts to be much larger? I'm trying to figure out: are you going to be servicing a few large pharma companies? Are you going to be a much bigger scale play with a lower price? Give me a sense of where your business is going.
We expect that the contracts increase, especially if they moved from local affiliates to more global RWE contracts, but obviously also volume. So repeatability of the studies and of the analysis are easier to be done than. So this is not project based. The studies can be. There's repeatability on the studies.
Okay. I have more comments, but Sven, why don't you and then ask other questions, and I'll come back.
I think you're mute, Sven.
Oh yeah, sorry. So I think this looks great, and congratulations on all the partnerships in the EU support, etc. I think that's a big achievement. I worked on a couple of data out projects with hospitals, and I always felt this is an absolute nightmare because you have, first of all, the whole legal process that you need to go through every time. I've seen numerous GDPR breaks on the receiving end that weren't my fault, but I needed to deal with then. And I felt that the data that I had in my hands was extremely hard to standardize. If you even look at lab values, different reference ranges for the same analyte, different synonyms for the same analyte. In one data set, the diagnoses were missing in 50% of the cases, and that's a 300K data set. And so I was wondering, like,
how do we, if we find out, yes, if we find those challenges, yes, how we are dealing with those, like taking one per case. Like the legal part, we are not doing this case by case. So this is umbrella agreements with the data partners. Obviously, each study then needs to be accepted by the data partners, but there is an umbrella agreement for this data partnership, and we don't need to revisit the agreement every time we want to monetize the data, let's say, together. The second part is data harmonization. Though, so obviously that's a big challenge, but the OMOP clinical data model has been helping us in standardizing more and more this work, and this is a community work. So we are not the only ones doing it. The clinical data model is improving. It's an incremental work. If you ask, the data is perfect and we can answer all the questions with the data sources, no, but every new study increases the quality and the harmonizability of the data.
Alan, if you don't have another question, so my second question, Pedro, is more about, second set of questions is more about market entry, and obviously you mentioned going from local to global. This is an area which has been traditionally been very hard to build a big company quickly. We've seen some very well-funded companies in real-world evidence like ATON and some others. It's always been a bit of a struggle because, number one, the pharma companies, in my opinion, don't care as much about the real-world evidence as they do about the clinical trial evidence to get approval. They care, but perhaps not as much. And secondly, there are lots of current companies who kind of do either big-scale data work with pharma or are doing consulting work with them, and it's kind of hard for a new company to break in, especially if you're trying to get to a global level. So, what's your strategy for sort of getting noticed, getting past these early contracts, and getting much bigger?
We see that the competitors are working much more on the demand side of the data than on the supply side of the data. We are doing a lot of work on the supply side of the data, so in the data custodians. So that is where we see the potential. And to be honest, I think this market has a lot of potential, but like the studies that are out there are based on really poor data. Like many times asking physicians about what happened and not the actual data that happened with the patient. So we see a lot of work on improvement. So the way to be noticed is showing the difference between the status quo, or how these studies are being generated today by consultancy companies like you mentioned, and the work that we are doing with the supply side of the data on actually harmonizing large quantities of data, like a hospital that brings us 10 million patient records harmonized at once in Europe. That is something that is not very common out there in studies with big pharma.
And what's your marketing? Great, you fix this supply problem, data supply problem. It's fantastic. What's your way of marketing this and getting this differential known out to the marketplace, out to pharma companies?
The pharma companies is start showing them the data that we have access to and that we have harmonized. A catalog, a metadata catalog, where they enter and they see the data that we have harmonized and the data partners that we have. So in the end, it's transparency over the potential clients, not on the data, but on the accessibility to the data.
Thank you. Good answer.
Are there any remaining questions or any other feedback? If not, then we can move on to the third startup. But before doing that, just a reminder to everyone to please post your questions in the comment section to the companies you're interested in right now, and we'll have a look at them at the end. And thank you to Promptly Health. Next, I would like to introduce the third startup, which is Mobio Interactive. Christopher, please share your screen and introduce yourself, as you have 3 minutes to pitch.
Thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, everybody, and thanks for tuning in to learn about how we treat mental health at scale. I am delighted to be here. There are 2 things I'd like you to remember about our product called OMDTX. First, it is clinically validated asynchronous psychotherapy for health systems and pharma. Secondly, it is a product that has the ability to objectively quantify stress for personalized care. How is this done? How is the measurement done? Well, it's very similar to a Fitbit or Apple Watch on the wrist, except we use PPG sensors in the smartphone to measure heart rate and variable heart rate. Those data are passed through a neural network to predict a level of stress for the patient with a very high degree of accuracy. So the product has an objective measurement, but it also has subjective tools as well. All these data are published. How does it work for the patient? Well, the patient would open the app. They would do what's called a snapshot or a video selfie, which takes 30 seconds. There's no video recording. This is just data measured in real time. And then the patient would get to enjoy the psychotherapy content, after which they would do another measurement, which would deliver a delta of how that the condition of that patient is. We've done a lot of work in cancer, not only acute care, but fear of reoccurrence. This is a study for fear of reoccurrence where we've dramatically been able to lower anxiety for those patients. We have another areas that we work in. We've been able to do a number of commercial partnerships globally. Most of them are in North America. But we've done 16 RCTs, which have been completed. The latest one that we're launching across our clinical partners is MSK, where all newly diagnosed cancer patients will have access to personalized care through our app. We've done quite a bit of work over the last 7 years in the regulatory process. We feel that we're very close to a SAMD indication for cancer survivors later this year for the FDA to launch in 3 geographies. And then we treat 11 different indications. Some were more heavy in than others. Obviously, cancer is one of the areas that we're deeply focused, but major depression, general anxiety disease, and pediatric brain injury as well. We've got a strong team across science backgrounds as well as commercial. Our founder and chief scientist CEO started this company because he wanted to scale mental health, which he wasn't able to do in his career. So that was kind of the birth of the product DTX. And we'd be very interested in talking to you about potential partnerships, either for an adjunct therapy for patients, or to be used in R&D to streamline the process. The product can be used independently or can be integrated through an API. Thank you.
Thank you, Christopher. Now over to the jury again for feedback and questions.
Christopher, quick question. I know the mental health space is becoming very crowded quickly. It seems like in the last year, there's, every day I'm hearing of a new app. Really, what differentiates you right now? And one question, do you have a coaching component, like a live body interaction?
We don't have that yet. I think down the road, that's probably in the plan, to have an algorithm that could take a patient to a live human on the back end, but that's later. Really, our focus has been doing the clinical rigor for the product. I think, like you mentioned, the sea of products out there, we just don't know if they work. So what was really important for the founders was to come up with a component to be able to measure the results to see if it's working. And that's been documented and published. So we're pretty happy about that. Of course,
sorry.
Yeah, sorry.
I was going to say, can I dive in a bit more into that, Christopher? So what actually happens? I hit the button, I measure myself for 30 seconds. You use video to translate to the complex way of translating to the heart rate variability. You get a stress measurement. What happens next? What's going on in the psychotherapy content you mentioned? And if it's not coaching, if it's not counseling, what are you doing? And does that matter as much, or is it the more that could you use other people's tools for that, or is it more the measurement that you care about?
Yeah, let me think how to answer that. So there's really two products, and those products are licensed together or independently. It really depends on your objectives. But the benefit of the measurement is the therapy becomes more personalized. The therapy, what we've been able to identify is the algorithm can choose the best care for the patients better than the patient can choose their own care. We've studied that. So I think we've got 1,100 modules now, and we give users the freedom to pick what they want. But we found out if they use the measurement tool, then it becomes more personalized with that tool.
But what's typically happening between measurements in that site? Are they doing a 2-minute exercise? Are they doing a video meditation? What is actually doing in that middle part, and how's that working?
Yeah. Great question. So initially, they're introductory modules, just introducing what mindfulness is. I mean, most of what we do is CBT, but there's other methodology in there as well. And then based on their goals and where they want to go, they get certain therapy on that. It can be anywhere from, I think the shortest session is 2 minutes, and some of them go up to 15 minutes.
I can keep going if nobody else has any questions. Sven, you might want to do it.
Go ahead, Sven. Sorry.
Go ahead, Sven. I had a bit of a delay. Go ahead.
No, I was going to ask you, Christopher, about patient engagement. I mean, with the mobile apps these days, I think one of the holy grail is how do you keep a patient engaged? Do you have any technology built in that is going to keep someone continually using the app?
Yeah, we use a few mechanisms for that, and I think it's always getting stronger as well. But there is a gamification component to the app. Of course, they realize the benefit of the progress that they're making, so that helps add compliance. But I think, unfortunately for PAIR, they didn't have a reimbursement component. That's where we're headed. But I think also care teams play a critical role in being on the back end of that of that system to help motivate the patients to continue to use products.
Great, thanks.
Sure.
Congratulations on everything, first of all, and the publications. It looks exciting. I'm wondering how much sort of algorithmic bias have you ruled out, or different skin types maybe make it more difficult? Have you had a diverse data set to train it on? And the second question, probably one that I often hear in pitches, where it's around user-generated data or even passive data, but where you need some sort of user interaction, and in this case, sort of looking at it, pressing the button, and so on. I think it could still be a barrier. If you want to use that on a short term, I think that's fine. If it's a couple of weeks and people just, they're still motivated, have a problem to solve. But I think in terms of looking at long-term data, even with gamification approaches, which I think is brilliant that you're putting that in, can be a little bit difficult. And so I think that's something maybe to consider with the use cases. And I was wondering if, in terms of willingness to pay, maybe have you looked at non-medical use cases as well in sort of the security space or other areas to see if somebody has signs of stress that I don't know, could be a lie detector or whatever else. Have you looked at not so regulated cases where you could maybe generate quicker revenues?
Sure, great. Okay, a lot of questions. Hopefully I won't miss it here. So your first question is what kind of bias are we seeing? We've worked with a pretty broad demographic on the studies. I know that we did one trial with Sanofi early on, which had a lot of different skin types in that study. The study was never, we pulled out of the study before it was completed, or Sanofi did. I think it was before my time. But what we did is we looked at skin types and we looked at any type of bias for that, and there was none. And that included makeup and a number of things. We didn't do anything with respiratory masks, but that was before COVID. So that had good results. And then I think you mentioned about what type of models. For us, the reimbursement pathway, I think, makes the most sense. We're very happy if care teams can recommend a product, but we'd love to have a way to get reimbursed and actually charge a patient for it, where they would be reimbursed by their provider. Or that we've done in the past, we've licensed our biomarkers to one of the large pharma companies for CNS disorders, and that they've been able to streamline their process and maybe weed out some candidates that maybe weren't ideal, where you have maybe poor uptake of a drug because of the comorbidity of mental health, people suffering with GAD or stress. And then, sorry, I think you had another question in there too, but I can't recall which other.
Non-medical use cases as other means of faster or more revenues potentially.
Yeah, I mean, we've worked with payers, a number of payers, and that's great, where they can have two things: either a marketing tool to kind of lure new customers in. I think the jury's still out on outcome studies with payers. It's a hard study to do. It requires a very large study group, and there's a lot of attrition, so most of them don't want to do it. So we just don't know yet. But that's one area we've gone. We've kind of stayed out of the consumer space just because we've done all the clinical validation, and that's kind of where we're focused. So,
good answer, thanks.
So, Chris, let me ask you one more sort of question, more about the business as a whole. You're currently you've been doing studies with the pharma companies. You've been mentioning going to reimbursement sort of in a more general sense. You're currently doing pharma company studies and clinical studies with them. How much money's gone in? Where are you in the sort of the revenue phase of the company? How close are you to sort of generating? Do you need a lot more money? Just where is the business as a whole? Give me a sense about where revenue is now and when you might get to profitability, given the different business models.
Sure, great question. And I think a lot of that is going to be dependent on investment. The majority of what we've done so far has been attributed through investors. We have had profit through health systems and a little bit through the studies, but for the most part, we're dabbling on the commercial side. So we do need help from investors.
How much have you raised and spent so far, and where are your revenue roughly?
$2.5 million USD so far, and we're looking at either pre-A or Series A right now. As far as what we've brought in, most of it's been before I came on board. I think under 2 million.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, Christopher, last question, Christopher. Excuse me. Have you been asked in your health system business, have you been asked to go at risk for any of your pricing? Or how are you pricing the health system market?
So we typically license to those groups, like CAMH, for example, in Canada. We do an annual license with them, and then they deploy the product to their patient base how they wish.
Great, thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. I would now like to introduce the final startup, which is Bloomful. Dupe, please share your screen and introduce yourself. Again, you have 3 minutes to pitch.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for having me here. I'm Dupe. I'm the founder of Bloomful. Before Bloomful, I was a doctor. I worked on the front line of the NHS for 7 years, and I was shocked at the level of gender disparity that exists in healthcare. It's a system which is very male-centric historically, and that's resulted in much poor outcomes for women across medicine, but especially around their gynecological health. 80% of women have had an unwanted gynecological symptom in the past year. And as a doctor, I would see women coming in every week with heavy bleeding, menopausal symptoms, or pain that were having a huge impact on their quality of life, mental well-being, or their ability to work. The fact is that as doctors, we're not equipped to deal with these issues. And because of that, the diagnosis and management of many very common conditions like PCOS, endometriosis, fibroids is slow, it's invasive, and it's really outdated. The pathways to care are ambiguous at best, and it can take on average of 8 years plus to be diagnosed. And because of this, women are spending out of pocket to manage this issue. And it's not just a few women. There are actually 19 million women in the UK with some type of gynecological symptom or diagnosis or fertility issue, which amounts to a huge opportunity. And the bigger opportunity is that the way that data is fed back into research and development is essentially non-existent. Pharmaceutical companies oftentimes need this information, but have difficulty getting it. And so a scalable way to self-assess symptoms for women, access gynecological care, which also serves as a gateway to better discoveries and research, is a no-brainer. And Bloomful is that solution. We are a new digitally enabled care pathway for better gynecological health. Our pathway begins with Lana, which is a self-assessment triage solution and a decision support tool that takes women's reported symptoms, it applies some conditional logic on the back end, and it delivers educational content and advice. We developed it alongside NHS gynecologists based on real-world experience and clinical best practice, including insights from over 100 women and 50 clinical consultations. In just a few weeks, we've had 5,000 users. We've seen week-on-week growth of about 32%, and we've collected thousands of data points already. We've really spent time understanding what our customers are searching for online, and we've iterated our product accordingly. We've also done a bit of revenue testing through our online clinic, which offers deeper diagnostics and longer term support through home blood tests, scans, and virtual consultations. And we've seen a 27% conversion to paid customer. Currently, we're operating B2C so that we can show growth and really just understand the customer. But we are doing that in the knowledge that it's not a sustainable model and that ultimately a commercially viable proposition for biotech and for pharma in terms of our data will give us the bigger return, and how we plan to harness our data to develop affordable, scalable AI healthcare products is what we're working on and thinking about right now. So in terms of the competition, it's very noisy and fragmented. It's a reasonably nascent field. Our points of differentiation are twofold. Firstly, we're building as a tech-enabled business from the start with a clear focus on our diagnostic tool, and that's going to lead to huge efficiencies as we pay up and enable us to collect really valuable, longitudinal, fully labeled data sets from the outset. And secondly, our geographic focus. There is huge gaps of data that sit outside the US and outside Europe, which our competitors haven't necessarily ventured to. And we've got a belief that there is a need to move into those geographies and build in such a way that is appropriate for those populations too. We are absolutely the team to win in this space. Our team has domain expertise, tenacity, and the vision to really deliver this mission and set a new standard for women's gynecological care. In terms of where we are now, I've started where I can with not much money, raised capital from angels last year. We've built an amazing team. We've received endorsement from Google, from KPMG. And our next step is really to turn what is currently a working prototype into a comprehensive, clinically validated medical algorithm suitable for future AI development and medical device approval, and to secure intellectual property on that. So we're going out to raise £800,000, really to fund the development of our tool, grow our team, and develop viable partnerships with research groups and pharma. Thank you.
Thank you for your pitch, Dupe. Over to the jury for questions and feedback.
Yeah, Dupe, hey, it's Alan. Had a question. The femtech space is getting, a lot of attention these days. It's in the news quite consistently. Do you see fertility as being a big addition to your portfolio in the future, or are you still looking at the menopausal space?
I do. So what we've seen over the last few months is that one of the critical drivers of women towards our startup, at least, is the desire to start a family. Oftentimes that's when people realize that there is an issue. And so we found that it really underpins many of these conditions. We've actually started not in menopause, but in chronic gynecological conditions like endometriosis and PCOS. Those are the things that those are the conditions, or at least the symptoms that we see coming to us. And they are very much underpinned by fertility. Many women in their 30s wanting to start children, realizing that they're not ovulating or that they have symptoms that are preventing that. So we see it as kind of an adjunct to every part of the building of this process, because it's a key driver for our customer.
Thanks.
Debate. Great presentation. I enjoyed it. By the way, my dad was an NHS gynecologist, so I think he'd be rolling in his grave if he knew that stuff was going on now. But anyway, it's clearly a really critical underserved problem, right? And you mentioned obviously out not only in Europe and the US, but elsewhere. It's I'm sure there's, if we think it's underserved in think about the developing world. My concern is you seem to be going in two different directions. Can you generate enough data to make this a kind of research base for pharma, and then can you actually build a sort of independent clinic, virtual clinic, and look and go up against the Mavens of the world and others? And I think Maven just bought a company in the UK. I'm not sure.
It did, yeah.
So I guess that the question is, which of those two are you going to focus on? Because to some extent, if you come pitch your investor, I'm a little scared. I think, great, this is good. They may have some slight edge. They may do this, that, or the other. But Maven has had hundreds of millions of dollars raised, and they're also, even they've done well, but even they've had a more complete approach to women's health. And if this is somewhat narrow, I'm a little concerned as if this is a treatment option. On the other hand, if you're going to become a research base for pharma, how are you going to get enough people on the system to generate all that data? So,
yeah,
which one of those paths are you going to go down eventually, and how are you going to get there?
It's a really valid question, and it's something that I'm constantly thinking about.
Sure.
So, you need all of that information to be useful for pharma, but then obviously you need a product that's going to drive people to you in order to get that. And obviously, we've seen how underserved women are. We've seen how our NHS is continuously stretched, and that doesn't seem to be improving. So it felt like, from what we were hearing and seeing on our research and our testing, that having an online clinic and building a digital tool as a sort of precursor to that felt like the right place to start to drive people towards us. We're very, very early in our journey, and I think there's going to be a lot of testing and a lot of, understanding of where the low-hanging fruit is before we can identify which path we go down on, which is the most efficient way to get to our outcome. But I think the comment's really valid, and yeah, it's something that we're thinking about and I'm considering.
And just in that first thing you're doing, I mean, user growth. I mean, you're very new, right? Only a couple of months old.
Yeah.
How? But it looks pretty impressive. I mean, if you've got 5,000 users in a couple of months, not bad for something that's very niche like this. How are you driving that growth, and how are you going to get that to being a bigger number, as soon as possible?
I'm just going to push back on the niche comment. It's not niche because
it's a niche diagnosis compared to like doing all primary care. I'm not saying it's a niche.
Yeah. Okay. So
it's a niche problem. I agree fully.
It's not a niche problem. We're solving an issue which actually affects most women at some point in their lives, whether or not they vocalize that or whether people are aware. And so, in answer to your question, how are we going to grow? I mean, I think there's a few avenues. At the moment, we're seeing a lot of, we're seeing a lot of people coming to us both through our ads and organically as well. But we've got some ideas around how to partner with, say, private clinics, for example, who obviously see women in person, as well as private clinics, I guess, is the first kind of port of call in terms of being able to be exposed to thousands of women. We're in discussions with a few who say have 40,000 women on their books, and they have a high rate of throughput as far as patients go. And we see a partnership opportunity there in order to raise the volume that we need.
Okay, I'd also add, I mean, I think that this is an area where there's lots of patient groups and lots of discussion online amongst women, entering that and proposing as a solution in a subtle way. I think it's a good idea.
Absolutely.
So it's always exciting to see a fellow doctor going into entrepreneurship. So thanks for that and for using your expertise. It makes a difference if somebody has been seeing the problems firsthand and observed it over a long time, had time to think about it. And I think I wanted to build on Matthew's questions, because obviously the first question is always, how do you get into that market? You seem to have solved that pretty well. I agree. The second question is, how do you scale it up? And I like your thinking around it, but of course it's still up to testing, which is completely fine. Another thing that I would worry about is, how do you stay in? And especially, no offense, I think it's brilliant, but a lot of it, to be fair, is content, what you're creating, right? Mm-hmm. And content is extremely easy to copy. You just reword it. Now with ChatGPT, you say, take all of this, somebody scrapes it for you, and you say, no, rephrase it so that there's no plagiarism detectable anymore. And then you hire somebody on Fiverr. I'm exaggerating a bit, right? But you get somebody to redo most of it, and you add a couple of features, and there you go. You have your generic drug equivalent to what you've been doing. And maybe if that person has more budget to do marketing and so on, you end up in a race to the bottom. So what would be the defensive modes that you envision that you can create to avoid someone to basically steal ideas in a smart way and do the same? Or let's say there's an established player, like a telemedicine player, or Apple with their watch, who end up saying, oh, somebody here has found a good idea. We're just going to build on our existing powerful tech stack and then add some of these services and smash everybody else who's there. What's going to be your response? How do you preempt that from happening?
I mean, I think that's why we started by building our digital tool. We wanted to build something that kind of puts a moat around us and raises, I guess, the barrier to entry to some degree, or at least adds defensibility to us. It's in its first iteration. It basically, as I mentioned, takes some logic and allows women to go from symptom to diagnosis. And once we've got that kind of medical registration, I believe that will be a great asset for us as a business to show differentiation with others and to I don't think it will be as easy as putting a service together and being able to replicate what we're doing. I don't know if that answers your question.
Not really. I think it's tougher than this, honestly. One thing to think about, and that's not the best mode, but is, can you get differentiate clinical outcomes with data that allows you to have data-driven services? Is there something that might be patentable? Can you get some exclusive connections? Can you integrate into something else, and so on? So I think it probably requires a set of modes, and just having a digital tool is quite easy to commoditize as well. So
okay.
It's one part. I don't think it will be strong enough, to be honest. But it's okay. We'll
figure it out.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's not an easy question.
Yeah, I mean, I think my add to Sven's comment is this is very much a branding game. And there have been attempts before to do specific different parts of women's health. Fertility, obviously, in the US, where for reasons, it became this big employer. It became an employer upgrade sort of benefit, and fertility, I think, Alan mentioned earlier, became a really important part. So you see all these huge numbers of fertility companies coming on board, and obviously it's a very high cost particular issue. And I think a lot of if when you have these chronic gynecological issues, which are so important to so many women, again, this isn't something that people think about as separate from the main healthcare system, the way, especially in the US and elsewhere, they think about fertility. So I think that's can you establish a sort of branded, well understood branded experience that, that Bloomful is the place to go online if you have issues around these 3 or 4 issues as a woman to sort of, and that's the tough bit. Once you get that, I think that's the moat. I agree with Sven. It's going to be really tough. Other than you do it as well as possible, it's going to be very tough to do it just on content and telehealth. But I don't think there is a brand in that area. So I think you've got a shot. It obviously will be tough to do it because, but on the other hand, there's a huge need. So it's great that you're doing it.
I mean, I think there's, like you said, there's a huge unmet need, and women are looking for this. They want a better experience. They want a brand that they can sort of hang on to in this area. And a lot of our work has been around how we speak to women, what the experience is, how we look, whether women can resonate with us as a company. And as we continue to build on our clinic, we want to, build that into every part of our touch point with our customers. So yeah, thank you. I think that's valid.
And building on that, just to encourage you, I think you could be a very powerful face of this that drives the brand because you are extremely credible and I think incorporate some of the things that are inherently part of the brand, which then becomes harder to copy because a competitor would need to find somebody like you. So maybe it's worth playing on that a bit.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you for that as well. We'd now like to open the floor to have questions from our audience. If there are any questions, the time is now. So please type in your questions in the comments section. If our jury members as well have any questions that are remaining, feel free to type them in as well. And if there aren't any, you can also directly reach out to the companies, or feel free to also reach out to us for introductions. Okay, if there aren't any, on behalf of the team, I would like to especially thank our jury members who volunteered their time to be here today, as well as the startups who pitched. Amazing job, everyone. We'd also like to thank everyone who has attended, and we hope you enjoyed the event. We will announce the Pitch Club winner next week, and so keep an eye out on our socials. To keep up to date on all things G4A, follow us on our social media channels on LinkedIn, on Facebook, on Twitter at G4A Health. And for any other information, visit our website at www.g4a.health, or you can send us an email on info.g4a@bayer.com. Once again, thank you all and have a great rest of the week. Take care.